right. Well, good evening to everyone. Thanks for being with us. So, well, we're delighted that everyone is able to join us. And as you know, this is the first of 3 of these events. We had so many sisters volunteer. By the end of the summer, we will have 22 sisters and 1 associate who has gone to the border. So we had to break up the groups. So we'll have, 1 group speaking, tonight, even though some of the faces you're going to see in the gallery are also sisters who volunteered, but they're going to be speaking at another night. And the very last one is August 31st. And that's to accommodate the folks who are going in August. So we would have a sense of as much as we can. And if more people go in the fall, we'll do it again. We'll just keep, sharing the stories. So as I said, we're very grateful. And 1 candidate, yes, Kathy Megan is saying that, Bethany, excuse me, I counted you among the sisters. But let me take this opportunity to, if you don't know Bethany Welsh, Bethany, raise your hand or do something that we can see you. Bethany is our candidate, and she's living in Pennsauken with, at the moment, Bonnie McMenamin and Colleen Gibson. And soon Clarissa will be joining that group when Colleen Gibson goes off to study. So we're certainly delighted that Bethany is with us tonight, but also that Bethany is with us in life. So, so the girls who are going to speak tonight, the sisters and including Bethany, who are going to speak tonight, could you just introduce yourself and tell us where you served? You'll have a chance to share a little bit more. And then after folks have introduced themselves, then Pat and Jean will lead us in prayer. Mary Kay, why don't you start?
I'm Mary Kay, and I served at Annunciation House in El Paso, Texas.
I'm Rosemary Golden.
Clarissa Vasquez.
And we served in McAllen, Texas, and we just got back on Wednesday.
Bethany Welch. I served in El Paso, also at Annunciation House at CDR, which is the large temporary shelter.
Pat Madden, and I served in McAllen, Texas.
Jean Large.
Yes, I served also in McAllen, Texas at the Humanitarian Respite Center.
Well, first of all, thank you for volunteering. Thank you for going, and thank you for being even more generous to share your stories tonight. So Pat and Jean, if you would lead us in prayer.
Thank you, Eileen. And thank you everyone for coming tonight. And maybe in our prayer, we could remember our sisters who are volunteering now in Laredo, Joan and Mary Helen, and Charlene in Arizona. So Pat and I thought that a song that came to us that spoke to our experiences and emotions during our 2 weeks at the Respite Center, we'd begin with just a clip of this song, and then we'd pray for and with you the World Day, Refugee Day of Prayer, a moment of grace. So Rose, if you would, play Does Your Heart Break?
When the walls fell and the hungry child cried out for help, did you hear the sound? Did your heart break? Does your heart break now? cannot feel it in my soul, cannot see you, I'm alone. Can the blind have sight, have sight? When you see us all alone, can you hear your people, Lord? Can the blind have sight, have sight?
And we pray in our moment of grace at this time, God of our wandering ancestors, long have we known that your heart is with the refugee, that you were born into time in a family of refugees, fleeing violence in their homeland, who then gathered up their hungry child and fled into an alien country. Their cry, your cry, resounds through the ages. Will you let me in?
Give us hearts that break open when our brothers and sisters turn to us with that same cry. Then surely all these things will follow. Ears will no longer turn deaf to their voices. Eyes will see a moment for grace instead of a threat. Tongues will not be silenced, but will instead advocate.
And hands will reach out, working for peace in their homeland, working for justice in the lands where they seek safe haven. Lord, protect all our refugees in their travels. May they find a friend in me and in us, and so make us worthy of the refuge I have found in you. Amen.
Amen. So Eileen, is it okay if I go first?
It certainly is. It took me a second to unmute myself, so you're great. Go ahead.
Thank you. So True Confessions, I left my outline in the copier at the Mother House, a few steps from my office, but I think it's God's way of telling me I should just speak from my heart. And when people say, what were the moments of grace? I couldn't capture them in 8 to 10 or 10 to 12 minutes, but in a few stories and 3 words, moments of grace was seeing trust in abundance, seeing patience in abundance, and also the, I don't know how I would say this, but the lived experience of people taking what they needed and giving what they could. So the very first day and every day afterward that we were there, if we weren't busy, we could see people come through the front door in a long line, making their way to the registration desk. And if by chance I wasn't busy, I would look up from the counter, my perch behind the pharmacy counter, and my heart would leap with joy and ache to see these dear neighbors coming in carrying only their babies and a manila envelope containing their vital papers. And I felt compelled to wave and to smile behind my mask and put my hand over my heart in welcome, sharing their having made it to this place. And later those folks would come with their children to the counter where they would get what we called wipes and dipes bags or meds or crema for their long hair. The children would look for something. Don't you have any toys or things for us? And it was in those encounters that I came to see and learn anew to take what you need, take nothing for the journey, but what you need, and give what you can. And I gave this woman a bag of diapers in a Ziploc bag that also had the dipes and another Ziploc bag. And she took it and she unzipped it, took out a diaper, and put it back on the counter. So she had one, I had 8. And she said in Spanish, only one is necessary. And at that moment, I just put my hand over my heart and put my hands in front of her in blessing. And the kids would come up looking for crayons, and we could only give them 2 or 3 crayons because there were so many children. And children would come back asking for another set, and I'd say, no mas, no more. I already gave you. Of course, I didn't speak Spanish. So I hope that they understood, as I hope that those families coming through the line to the registration desk would realize that I was one with them. And I also had the experience of hearing God say, God's heart breaks. And the words and tune of the song came back to me. Our very last day, we were asked to go in and help to dish out a meal, the hot meal. And 3 young men would serve the trays that we had filled. And I was on tortillas, and I had very hot tortillas in my hand. And sometimes, rather than try to separate the sticky ones, I'd try to put 2 on the plate. And each of them would say, only one in Spanish. And again, take what you need, give what you can. And back to the crayons, a mother and her child came back. Now they had 3 supposedly. They came back with about 2 or 3 dozen crayons in a Ziploc bag that they had gotten, maybe for diapers. So over and over again, I had that experience of taking what you can, taking what you need, giving what you can. And the last thing I would say, truly that moment of grace, was these dear neighbors trusted the journey, that they would find someone at the other end, which was really just the beginning of yet another journey here in the United States. But they trusted Pat and I to take them places, either to the pharmacy or ER or clinic. Or we would pull up at a place looking to bring people back to the center. And they got in the car. They trusted us. They trusted that they would be helped and they'd find a place of safety. And Pat's going to tell you more stories about that trust and those rides in the car.
Well, thank you, Jean. Well, it was certainly good to go with a friend to share these amazing stories and amazing journey with the people in Mcallen. And as I said to Jean, we were there on the Feast of Corpus Christi. We are the body of Christ. And that's what I kept thinking. I told Jean, I said, all these lines to me like our communion lines, feeding people. giving them clothes. And the words of consecration were, gracias a Dios. Thank you, thank you. As Jean said, people were so grateful. And they stood in line a long time. Many days we had over 900 people there. So I kept looking and I say, this is the body of Christ. And I wrote that, I felt like each day we were Jesus and we received Jesus along the way. And during this pandemic time, we only really captured people's eyes, which it was amazing in a way because, their eyes had to tell the stories either of pain or joy but the children, you knew they were themselves running around asking for crayons and playing. And as Jean said, Jean was the DD, designated driver of the huge 18-passenger van. And I was the assistant. And I did, in my imperfect Spanish, we were able to hear stories of people. You had a better chance there because it wasn't crowded and it wasn't noisy, but to hear people. And we taped one man and he said, my government is corrupt. There's no work. There's no food. There's no people. That's why I'm emigrating to the United States. It was he and his son. I said to Jean, sometimes when we went to the hotels, I feel like there was human trafficking because we run around the back of these hotels and the whole back wing of people were people who had been quarantined for COVID. So, and they got in the car and they said, they got in the van and so it was in those times picking up from the ER. And one lady we picked up at a clinic and we were waiting for another person and her son. And so she asked Jean and me if we could get her sneakers. And I looked at them and right across the street was Target. And we had been given lots of donations. So we went to Target and Jean stayed in the van. And I looked at the little girl, Genesis, and she needed sneakers too. But Eileen Marnian taught me this trick about looking at people's feet and measuring the sizes. So I used my skills, Eileen, and I went in and I figured, if they don't fit, we're still here in Target. And when we went in, came out and I did an amazing job. They were a perfect fit. And the little girl looked at me and she gasped, oh, and it broke my heart. As Jean said, you kept putting your heart. And this week, I got a text from them. I couldn't believe it. And I said, how did that happen? She said, thank you to your friend for being angels to us. And it just broke my heart again, and she was in the mother was there. She was there because she had hypertension. And I said, I would have had hypertension all the way through. So we had to get her medicine and take it to the pharmacy, except they were leaving that night and we weren't able to take her to the pharmacy to get her medicine. And one of our first trips, we went in our little car and we took people to the courthouse. Little Wilmer from Guatemala was born in March on 25th in Texas. So therefore he had to have his birth certificate. So as we journeyed with them and talked to them and, where you're from, where you're going, they were going to Virginia. And we went there to the town hall and I had the opportunity, I called Rosa with whom we work, and she was able to speak to them, properly and as one Guatemalan to another. And she was pleased to do that. So this little family of 4, we took them to the courthouse and returned them. And they were leaving also that night, but they needed that document. And the song, Does Your Heart Break? Jean and I talked about it a lot, when you see all the people coming in and their children and just clinging to them. And, as Jean said, only asking for what they need. And it was a privilege to be there. And also another one about volunteers. The volunteers that we met, I said to Jean, our world is so small and yet so big. We met sisters from all over. I met a man whose parents were buried from the funeral home, which the Welcome Center is now. And we met sisters and volunteers from Cincinnati, all over. A doctor came with her family. A young woman from Notre Dame was volunteering for 8 weeks. So, behind the counter connections were made, and our world seemed bigger and somehow closer. And it was just an awesome privilege to be there. And as I said, I wrote that to be part of the body of Christ. And I wrote, church should be a respite for the needs of the hungry, the wandering, the shirtless, the shoeless, and those who are near despair. We are grateful we were able to be part of the active church in Mcallen. Thank you.
Thanks, Pat. Why don't we just pause for a second just to catch our breaths? And Mary Kay, would you like to speak? And we'll just catch our breath, and then whenever you're ready.
Yeah, it is catch your breath is a good way to express the kinds of feelings that come over us when we are serving there at the border, because there is so much that takes away our breath. And I too, the way you started, Jean, I was thinking of words, that I would focus on as I shared this evening. And the words that came to me were inspiration, courage, and resilience. And actually, I heard both of them as you, Jean and Pat, were just sharing. And I guess, I'd just like to start with saying that during my time, I arrived in El Paso during Holy Week, and it was the middle of Holy Week. And then I stayed till the middle of, into the third week of April. So it feels like it's far back right now, but yet so fresh when I hear other people share. And at that time, the doors were in some ways just opening up. And we were beginning to see and experience, the fallout, of the policies that had been put in place, as we know, over the last 2 years in particular. Of course, our policies in the U.S. go back way longer, but in particular, the closure of the border and what's called the MPP, Migrant Protection Protocols, which really forced people to stay in Mexico, when they made it up to the border during their entire time of seeking what is rightfully their right, to seek asylum in the U.S. But it was ordered through Homeland Security that would all happen, while they stayed in Mexico. And when that was lifted, and people began to arrive across the border, tent cities that had been in existence for 2 years plus on the Mexican side, along with, overcrowded houses and other kinds of makeshift places that people were living. It just spoke to me of the amazing, resilience and determination that people had to hang in there, everything in them, and even the voices would be from the US saying, go home, go back to where you came from, but they did not. they did not. They stayed and waited and waited and waited. And even now, the numbers of people are really just coming slowly. We wondered at that time, and the leaders, of the house there, the people who are long term, wondered why we weren't, getting flooded with thousands and thousands of people, but they just weren't coming in those kinds of numbers. They were coming much more slowly. And in fact, we were learning, as we might have heard, but hearing much more directly, that people were and are still being deported in large numbers. People, in fact, were being flown up from the Rio Grande Valley, in the southern other end of Texas, that couldn't be processed there or didn't have the space to be processed. They would come up in a plane. They had already crossed the border. They were welcomed across the border. They were put on a plane, and thought they were being brought up to a different city in Texas. And what would happen is that only a handful of those people were put into a van and brought over to Annunciation House. A large number of those people, in a random sort of way, were taken back across the border. And there they were, after that very long journey. They found themselves in Mexico again. And so, the kind of, I heard a lot of, weeping out of gratitude for somehow they felt the people that I was, meeting in the intakes. I was half the time that I was present at Annunciation House, I was doing intakes, and the other half was involving other things, serving people, planning travel bags, working on travel bags, hospitality, etc. But as I heard their stories, so many of them would feel this guilt. How did I get here? How did I get lucky? Some people that I was sitting right next to, on the plane, are not with me. They're not here. So there was there were mixed emotions, feeling enormous gratitude, but somehow like survivor's guilt in some ways, and so on top of everything else that these poor people had suffered, then they had that extra layer of wondering about the people that they had, and in some cases, gotten to know personally and had lived with over a period of time. So I heard that story again and again, and that was very painful. But when I wrote my little reflection for the e-news, the film Dying to Live, kept coming back to me. And many of you may have seen that film. It's a wonderful half-hour film, that, was produced almost 20 years ago now, but it's still the real story of people are willing to risk their lives, hang in there, the way migrants always have and refugees from around the world, in order to give a better life, for their children and their families. So risking, everything. Just two short stories. One I already wrote up, which some of you may have read, is the story, many stories stay with me, but the story of the woman who, Fatima, who talked about her husband and her young son, 9-year-old son, who was murdered, and they were both murdered in Guatemala. And she was determined that her only other child, this young daughter, would not suffer that. She would do anything. She kept her daughter from going to school on the Mexican side, even though she said there was some possibility for that, but she didn't want her out of her sight so that she could have a chance, and here she was, So she had pictures, and I mean, it's just, she had pictures actually of her husband and her son in coffins, showing me how what they had gone through, and here they are, and here she is with her daughter. So the desperation, for new life, and the resilience and the courage, that's one story. Another story was a very young woman who had two little babies with her. She didn't have a husband with her. She was just there herself with these two little babies. And she was worried sick because her 2-year-old, they had come from Honduras, and her 2-year-old was born in Honduras, but this little infant in her arms, she said, this little boy is Mexican. So when I was filling out the paperwork, she was telling me he's Mexican. And of course, it's because she was raped in Mexico during her stay there. And so this child, she was so worried about being taken away from her, because she didn't actually have any proof of paperwork. She didn't have anything. She said, just don't let them take this baby away from me. This is my baby. This is my baby. She just kept saying over and over, just like this other child. So my heart, as that song, played during our opening prayer, was just aching every day with the amount of pain that people had to hold in their lives, and the trauma that they've experienced, and the worry that they feel for even, their dear neighbors, that are not even getting this new chance like they are. So, I just am going to end with saying, since I've come back, what I am most focused on and worried about are all these people who got here and are in various places around our country, and who are going to be waiting, for their court case and proceeding date, to come, and just hoping and praying that somehow, that we're going to be changing these policies over the months, in year to come, under Biden, so that more of these people are not going to be deported, as is normally the case, because the percentage of these people that have even made it this far to all these safe houses, typically do get deported. So that's where my heart has been since, how to prevent, how to advocate, and how to change our U.S. policies so that this cycle doesn't continue to happen. So I'll just end there with that ache that I'm carrying, and somehow call, to do something more seriously about it.
Thanks so much, Mary Kay. Again, why don't we just take a second or two, and then Bethany, if you wouldn't mind, you'd be our other representative of El Paso. Whenever you feel ready to start, we'll just take a few minutes. Thanks, Mary Kay.
So I too had the opportunity to serve in El Paso. While Annunciation House is the parent organization, the site that I was at was called Casa del Refugiado, or CDR for short. And if you were to picture what you might think of as a temporary shelter, particularly if there's a natural disaster or something that you might see more in the developing world, where the toilets are porta potties and the showers are in a trailer and the beds are cots. That was the space that I was serving in. The capacity was 500, although we didn't hit that number while I was there. So precarious and tenuous for sure, but definitely much like the other spaces that were described, a pause, right? A pause on the journey from one part of a journey to another. There are two words that I also want to share, which I think help capture my time. And the first is sisterhood, and then the second one is mutuality. So if you know me or don't know me, you might be aware in some form that most of my candidacy with the congregation has been on Zoom. So I think I counted 16 of my 20 months have been in this kind of space, which, while a gift, is, lacking a little bit in terms of relationship and human connection. So I was really delighted when I got to Annunciation House, to CDR, and realized while I went alone, how many sisters from other congregations were there. Mm-hmm. So there were sisters in the 2-week cycle that I was in. There were sisters who came every week from a variety of places, from New Mexico and from Texas, who it's their usual Tuesday night, right? Or their Thursday afternoon or their Friday evening. So they were doing airport drop-offs, and they were folding clothes in the roperia, or they were helping in the comedor for dinner. And it was just a gift of sisterhood that I had not anticipated. And I also think there were younger sisters too, which is a rare gift in this time and place. And that connection also came through grace of a social media post. And someone reached out to my housemate, Sister Colleen, and said, I think Bethany's in El Paso and I'm in El Paso, and she's never met any of the other Giving Voice sisters. Could we connect? And so ended up having just amazing fellowship. And I think that was the counter, right, to the incredible suffering, the pain, the carry, the weight that you wanted to carry. I think so many of us have felt that weight of almost wanting to lift and pick up part of the burden of suffering and not being able to do it, but being in solidarity with others who are also present to that. And so that was huge for me, was the sisterhood. The other thing I wanted to say was about mutuality. And so because during the time that I was there from at the end of May into June, the policies that Mary Kay described, many of them went into effect. So the migrant protection protocol was officially ended on June 1st. And then there's a lawsuit, and it's complicated, but with the ACLU around Title 42. Both of those changes meant that many, many more people could start arriving through Border Patrol or ICE, or even through apprehension. So we saw a lot more people coming through the desert, people who were injured falling off the wall, et cetera. And so we went from my first couple of days, about 40 people arriving each day, to later on in the end of the first week and the second week, 140, 180. So the pace got very, very quick, very fast. I am not a fluent Spanish speaker, so my role was very much behind the scenes. And so if there was paperwork to do or there was dinner to prepare, I was, in that function, in that role. And so behind the scenes as much as I could be. And again, just not really sharing in many of the stories, certainly aware collectively of just what everyone was carrying, but there just simply wasn't time to be with folks. We were on the move. We were there to work. So I was kind of carrying all of this to the airport on my departure day. And probably the story I will carry the most comes not even on the ground, but up in the air. So I got to my gate to fly home through the El Paso to Dallas Fort Worth, and I walked into the gate, and I heard my name very loudly, and I turned around, and it was a young dad of a family of 4 who had been at the shelter for almost an entire week with me. So most families, 10 hours to 36 hours. That's the average length of stay, very quick meal, bed, your plane ticket to your sponsor, and then you head out to the airport or the bus station to go to your sponsor. Not everybody has success in getting a sponsor, and so that would extend the duration of their time. So here's this young dad, super excited to greet me, and it wasn't even on my radar that I would encounter folks. Like I had kind of turned that part of my heart off, right? My brain had just clicked into, here's your boarding pass, time to go home. And so, we had a nice greeting, and then I sat down, I put my headphones on and got a magazine out, and I feel this tug on my sleeve, and it's his daughter. She's about 8 or 9. And unlike our friends at the respite center, our kids could not have anything to play with because of COVID protocols. So they didn't want the kids sharing anything. And I think most of us, if you are with kids who you don't share a language with, you go to one of two things: sports, or for me, like a nerd, I go to art. And so to not be able to like color with kids or sit with kids was just, it was unusual. So in the airport, at some point, there was about 8 kids then sitting down coloring. All the parents are kind of in different, spaces watching us. The little girl, her little brother came by, just about the age of my niece, similarly extroverted at about 3. And he started to round up other kids who'd also been at the shelter, who were in our gate going to Dallas, Fort Worth, brought over a little Haitian toddler who just proceeded to break crayons and eat them. And, there's just that profound grace, right? Profound joy of being present with folks. And we get on the plane eventually, and I file into my seat, and I'm seated behind this family of 4. And, again, just that like kind of delight to say, thank you, God, for being able to see a tiny bit more of the story, right? Because as was said, most people will not get asylum. So the number last year was like 20, I think it's 7.3% of families got asylum. Their cases were decided favorably. That means 2/3 were decided negatively. And so, you just want to know like a tiny piece of it'll be okay kind of moment. So, we're in the air somewhere over Texas, and the announcement goes on that there'll be no refreshments on this flight, both in English and Spanish. And without even missing a beat, the dad picks up this travel bag, turns around to me in the seat behind him, and hands me the travel bag. And he says, "There's snacks in here," which I knew because I packed the bag. And I knew I packed that bag because I had a specific bag I thought was better for their family travel than the other college kids thought was good for moms and dads. And I just, similarly as was shared behind the mask, just was grateful for the mask because I was sobbing. Like, that moment of Eucharistic mutuality, of sharing what we had, the brokenness, the pain, the joy. There's very little comparable in a sacred space that could compare with that moment. Just to share what was available. And then on my end, right, to know that I had prepared that so they would be fed, and yet out of their lack, they and abundance were willing to share it with me. So the piece I'm definitely continuing to carry forward into everything from advocacy to relationship is the goal is mutuality, right? The goal is not that we have to keep fixing or saving or showing up places, but that there's such a space of mutuality that we don't need that anymore, that we don't need a respite center. I'm really grateful for the congregation to support my travel and my time there, and especially all the sisters who accompanied me, Mary Kay, chatting on the email, checking in throughout the week, and everybody else too. So thank you so much for this space.
Thanks so much, Bethany. Well, we can pause again, and then maybe Clarissa and Rosemary, will you be ready to return to Mcallen for a little bit? So again, let's just take a pause, and then whoever wants to begin.
Desktop or Rose, we're going to need your help. We need to share something.
Just share your screen. Just click share screen.
Rose trying to do that, and she's got to get Safari. Is that where we are?
I think so.
Open.
Let's see it again. Hold on.
Or can you minimize and
Share
go there?
computer.
Try this. I just made you a co-host. See if that works.
All
Okay.
right. It was Safari. How about minimize the screen?
Minimize which one?
Your window has to be open. The window that you're going to share has to be open before you go into share screen.
Let me see. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it?
There.
Okay.
And then click share.
Oh, it was down there.
Mhm.
Can you see this?
Not yet.
Oh, but the two of you look lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so let's go through it
You
one more
do.
time. Click on share screen at the bottom of your screen.
Okay, hold on.
Then
Okay.
choose what you want to share. It should show up if the window is open.
Here.
And then to the right, bottom right, you should see the word share.
All right.
Share, click on the screen.
Are you on an iPad?
She's on an Apple computer.
Let me get this off.
Should work on a computer. Sometimes the iPads don't let you share, but the computer should.
The joys of technology.
Do you see share screen at the bottom?
Right there, right there.
But you need to do the share screen
First share screen,
first.
and you
share.
should see a window with a bunch of things in it,
Mhm.
Yes.
including the one you want to share. So click on it.
Oh,
Click on it,
There.
and then
Open.
at the bottom right.
I got it now.
Okay,
Click on it.
just hit share, and we should get it. No.
No, it's not that. It was the well, I can just talk without it, I guess. And we can have that. I wanted you to see the images. One more. It doesn't seem to be opening up even though she has it open.
And you did hit the word share at the bottom right.
Yeah, a couple times.
Okay,
Okay.
sorry.
It's okay. So you want to stop?
Mhm.
We'll just talk.
Yeah.
So when the opportunity came to go, I jumped on it, but I knew two things. I wouldn't go alone. I wanted to go with someone and with others, and it had to be when school ended. And even though we had Zoom gatherings ahead of time that let us know it was going to be challenging, I arrived with some apprehension, but I don't think I was really prepared. And I've spent most of my religious life with the poor, but I still wasn't prepared. And I'm sorry if my voice isn't strong. I'm recovering from an upper respiratory that I got while I was down there. I think I was so overwhelmed by the number of people and the needs. When we were there, we had well over, we had hundreds, and then we had over 1,000, and one day we had over 1,700. It was just tremendous. The number of people was, you couldn't keep up. You just couldn't keep up. And so their needs were so great. Their patience with lines was just hard to imagine how we would be with all the lines that were required. Our sisters were phenomenal to be with. They tried every day to go shopping, to buy lycra or lycra, as they called it, to buy sippy cups, to buy baby bottles, to buy needle, the formula, to buy anything that was needed. And as fast as we could buy it, it went out. That was just tremendous, the needs and the amount of people. I tried, of course, because I could speak Spanish, I tried to do a little organization like fila, line, one at a time, anything I could say. And I'd say, soy la monja brava. I'm the angry one. Please follow the orders or whatever it was. I try to get them to laugh, and I try to bless all the children on the forehead, tell them, ask that God accompany them in Spanish, that God be with them, tell them that we were praying for them. When I got the opportunity the first week to work in the pharmacy, I loved it. And I kept telling the group, oh, the pharmacy is wonderful. It's not like clothes. And then things happened and we all ended up in the pharmacy. The first days in the pharmacy, because didn't have things prepackaged, you had to package everything in front of the people. So they're helping you hold a baggie, you're pouring Nido in, they're helping you hold a baggie, you're giving diapers, you're giving wipes, you're doing all of that. And that allowed for some exchange of where are you from, where are you going, God be with you. So that was a wonderful experience to have a little bit more time with people. And then things got super busy. So one day I took off and I, because I'm not feeling well and wanting to get stronger, excuse me. So I walked the station. So we had the privilege of staying at the Basilica Hotel. And the Basilica is gorgeous. And that's what we wanted to show you in the pictures. It's Our Lady of San Juan del Valle Basilica. And we got to go to Mass. Well, we got to Mass a lot, but Mariachi Mass was just out of this world. And Celeste has a video on YouTube of all of us raising our hands and praising God. And I probably never knew I was charismatic until, that's the Basilica, but until I was there. I guess I had an inkling. But this Father Nicolau was it was such a healing experience. And it was so joyful. So we had this beautiful place to stay and these wonderful grounds where we could share community and eat together and be together. And it was a balance from the extreme suffering and poverty. So the one day I took off, I walked to the Stations of the Cross, which were just gorgeous. And so without prolonging, I'm just going to share a little bit from what I was writing. So the first station we all know is Jesus is condemned to death due to the corruption, the gangs, and violence, and all the circumstances that make living in their countries unsafe. Our brothers and sisters are condemned to crossing the border that leads to the United States. Jesus is made to bear his cross. Crossing the border subjects our sisters and brothers to attacks, to robbery of all of their possessions, including their telephones and documents, and families are raped, mothers and their little children. Jesus falls the first time. Families come sick, traumatized from their experiences, and are given ankle bracelets to wear as prisoners. Jesus meets his mother. Families arrive at centers of respite for clothes, medicine, showers, food, a mattress to sleep on. Simon is made to bear the cross. Volunteers arrive daily, working long shifts, trying to help feed, help dress, and be present to our sisters and brothers. Veronica wipes the face of Jesus. Doctors, nurses, midwives arrive volunteering clinical services to alleviate the suffering. Jesus falls the second time. Our families wait in long lines every day, all day, for meals, for food, for medicine, for clothing, to shower. The women weep over Jesus. Volunteers affected by the suffering have trouble sleeping, get run down and sick. Many are moved to advocacy as well as encouraging others to donate funds to purchase more needed supplies. Jesus falls the third time. Families here in the States cannot be reached. Supplies run out. There are no clothes. There's no medicine. There's limited showers. Their children get sick. Jesus is stripped of his garments. Some are desolate, sobbing, emotionally spent, sleeping all chairs while holding their children. Jesus is nailed to the cross. Some sponsoring families fail and reject those who recently arrive. Jesus dies on the cross. Many of our brothers and sisters die in the attempt to cross the desert to come. Jesus is taken down from the cross. Some are so ill they have to go to the hospital to receive treatments. Jesus is placed in the tomb. Some test positive for COVID and their plans are delayed as they quarantine. And Jesus is resurrected. Many leave for the bus stations, airports, and experience hope for the first time. And our group got to see them and got to wave to them and fist bump them and see them there. And we got to see them in the airport. But it's a very powerful and emotional experience that I would recommend with caution, even though we were taking our emergency and drinking our water and saying, stop, hydrate. It's just a powerful experience. And I think because of the numbers, it was hard to stay healthy there. But it was one that I would recommend for sisters to experience, just to be part of the journey with our brothers and sisters. So thank you for letting me share.
Thank you, Clarissa.
It's beautiful.
I have to brush,
Okay.
blow my nose.
Okay. My experience from El Paso and my experience from Mcallen remains the same. We are one body in Christ. Their story is our story. We are just so disconnected from how we got here that we don't recognize the story. I'm blessed to know one of the stories of my great-grandfathers, and it does make me feel a little bit more connected, though I think their journey is so much more dangerous and arduous. But it helps. It does help to know one of the stories. And I wonder if we had known, if we knew, we being the church or Americans, if we would be a little bit more supportive of them coming. So my experience in El Paso was very different from my experience in Mcallen, and I was not prepared for what I experienced when I first stepped into Mcallen. It was way more crowded. It was very dark, and it was very noisy with lots and lots and lots of screaming children. That, though, did not really stop me from at least trying to,
Bring joy.
To bring joy and to also relate to the people. We were in the closed room, which was an impossible job because they didn't have any small men's and women's, mostly pants. So almost everyone's small. So it was very, very difficult. Nor did we have 2T, 3T, 4T, and size 5 pants. So it was very, very, very difficult. Clarissa and Seal would be going out most of the time because they knew Spanish. And I remember one time I tried to go out, and I was okay at it until it got to the socks. I said, okay, where are the socks? And so somebody goes, oh, they're in here. So they pointed to 3 different bins. I was like, no way am I going to find a pair of socks, a men's pair of socks in 3. I just couldn't do it. So I pretty much stuck with the with the little boys' clothes. And even when we went out to buy things, I would stick with the little boys' clothes. I would get the 2T, 3T, 4T, no matter how much we got. And I'm telling you, we went to a thrift store, and every one of us, with because of the generosity of
Congregation.
the Sisters of St. Joseph. So thank you, Eileen Marnie and everyone else. We got a whole big shopping cart, thank you, full of clothing, like for one set of people. So so mine came to 206 cents. So everyone had a cart. Everyone had a cart like that. And it would last, I don't know, maybe an hour, like we'd be good for maybe an hour, and then we wouldn't be good anymore. Then we wouldn't have it. And then we try to buy, I found a place where they sold shoes for $1.99. So we tried to stock up on them. So whatever they needed, we would try to get. So people would recognize me from the clothing room because we had pink shirts on, which were beautiful, thanks to Celeste. If I was walking, somebody would stop me, and I don't know Spanish, so I'd listen for a word, that I recognized, and I'd lean in and I'd put my ear like this, and they'd say blah, Spanish. I didn't get not one word, did I hear. So I go, ropa, and they say, sí. So every time I just say ropa, sí. I never got one word. So unfortunately, ropa was not always available. And I sometimes when I would look at their envelope, I'd say, I couldn't even say, and I couldn't even remember the word envelope. So I just go or point to somebody else's and show them, so if they were not leaving today, I'd say, what's the word? What's the word? Voy? I'd say voy hoy or voy mañana. And they'd say mañana. And I'd say, oh, luego. And they'd say, okay. So I was so grateful that, I could at least say something to them that they were okay with it because it was tomorrow, it wasn't today. So even if it was today, sometimes I'd sneak up and I'd, like roll up some clothes and try to bring them down. So I'd try to bring them down, and then I'd look out on people, and, I'm telling you, every set of eyes of the mothers were looking back at me because they knew I had clothes. They were all looking back at me, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know where they are. And a lot of times I never made the rendezvous, but I really tried to, one of my big things was, and I will always, even in El Paso, I was really an advocate for the children being able to play, so thanks again to the funding, I could go across the street to, I called it the spinner and the ball store, because that's what I would get over there, spinners and balls. So the first time I was getting the spinners, I was looking for one, and I have a million of them still. So I had the spinners, and the lady said, 12 for $1.99. I said, 12 for $1.99? And she said, 12 for $1.99. I said, 12 for $1. I mean, we just went back and forth about 5 times because we would pay probably $5 for one, or $3 for one. This was 12 for $1.99, which was amazing. So I would go around with balls, and I have this jacket that has a lot of pockets in it. So sometimes I'd be wearing the jacket. It has inside pockets and outside pockets. So I'd have like the balls in one. The balls were in my pants pockets. So I was a little bulgy. I had cars in another one. I would have spinners in another one. And then I'd have lollipops in another one. So everyone got a lollipop. But so people would really oftentimes run up and ask me, and if I had it, I'd give it. If I didn't have it, I would say, oh, no more. Or sometimes I would say, oh, bueno. I'd pretend that I was talking to them, and I'd, put it in the mom's hand. So everyone didn't come up to me. So, and at the very end, I think it was the second to last day when I was giving out lollipops, I hear someone say, sister, and no one called sister. No one called a sister, but sister, please don't give lollipops to the people. And I said, oh, I didn't know we weren't allowed to give. I really didn't know we weren't allowed to give lollipops to the people, but I was happy to give them to the ones that I was able to give them to. And the other thing, besides Ropa, sometimes they'd come to me and say the Spanish, Spanish, Spanish. I'd still listen, and I didn't get a word. And then I'd say pesos, and they'd say sí. So they wanted me to take them over across the street and just get their money exchanged. So I'm telling you, one man was so grateful, and he was trying to express it to me. And luckily, we found somebody at the door who knew both Spanish and English, and he was just, I mean, overwhelmed with what I did, and I am totally overwhelmed with what he's doing, you know. So I don't have, I didn't make the kind of relationships that I made with the people in El Paso. I don't know why. I think it was maybe because of the sheer number of overwhelming number of people. But and I was looking for that a little bit. I didn't experience that, but I was grateful for you know, the times that I did catch somebody's eye or smile, or, you know, somebody, one little boy was coming up with, pretending he didn't get, you know, a spinner, and I knew the spinner was behind his back. So, you know, we had a little bit of a thing there. So I was really grateful for those times, and especially for the people who came all the way back with us to Philadelphia. You know, we were able to get off the plane and see somebody, which was so great. Even for the people who do stay and are able to stay, I still am concerned for their well-being. You know, is their sponsor taking care of them? Is the husband that they, you know, are meeting, were they faithful? You know, are they still gonna be good to them and take care of them? But you know what, I need to find a way to turn that to a little bit more of a hopeful thought. So that's what I'm going to be working on. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks so much, Rosemary. And again, if we just pause, and then Celeste, after a few seconds, whenever you're ready, we'd love to hear from you.
Whenever I'm ready. I'm not sure, because it's going to take some time to really sit with these stories. I really wanted to go to the border for a very long time, but I was not able to because I was having some issues, medical issues. So it was great when Clarissa said a group was going, because I knew I didn't want to go alone. But I wanted to go because some of this is my story. You know, I am an immigrant. My parents sent me from Poland to be raised by an aunt and uncle here in the States for greater opportunity. So I have always, as I, you know, would watch TV and see the stories, I knew some of what someone would be feeling in those circumstances. And I wanted to be there. And yet, same thing, I was not ready for what I met. You know, Mcallen, which is where I was with Clarissa, Rosemary, and Cecile, and others. It was great in a way of having the support, but it was overwhelming because of the numbers. And I think you already heard some of that. And so I experienced a great purification of service, of why I came, because it was so busy and we could do so little. You know, I was in that dreaded clothing room, which actually I would have normally loved. You know, I've always loved clothes, and I got pretty good actually at guessing the sizes. I wasn't as good at guessing the men's sizes, you know, like that was so I kept saying, I didn't come for this. You know, you had to guess what the guys wore, and I had no clue. no clue. But the frustration of the disorganization, the chaos in the room itself, not having enough supplies, no matter what we bought, it would be gone so quickly. And it was so hard to go out and somebody would show you their torn shoes, like the soles coming off, and can I have zapatas? I got better at some Spanish words, and we just didn't have it. We didn't have it to give. So that's what I'm talking about, that at the end of the day, what we did was a lot, but so little at the same time, and so and the stories, we didn't get a chance to really get the stories because we were so busy, plus my lack of Spanish, so what I started to do was really look for the small things, the small joys. Okay, so this one little girl wanted a pair of jeans, and there were no jeans for little girls in the room. But as I was coming out, someone handed me this little jean jacket that I knew she'd love. So I kind of hid it behind my back. And I came out with the choices, because we always tried to give them some choices in clothes. So we'd bring out maybe 2 outfits, so that they could kind of look through it. It was like one of the few choices that they may have experienced this far. And so I could see her disappointed little face. And her mother picked the pants that she was going to have in the top. And then I pulled out the jacket from behind my back, and you should have seen her face. It just totally lit up. And it was holding on to those little moments. To make some connection with people. The little boys would bump fist you. Who knew that was like a universal, right? So I would say buenos dias. I would bump fist the little boys. I would look for those little joys. When I worked in the pharmacy, I would give out the coloring crayons and the pictures. Now, I'm an artist, right? Imagine having to give 2 colors out to these kids like that. That was just more frustration. And yet I would give them out and they'd be so thrilled. Okay, they would just take them. And then they started coming back with their pictures done to show me. All right. And I would try to say in as little Spanish as I knew how wonderful they were. I wish I could have hung them up, but we didn't have that kind of tape. So that was just another wonderful way to connect, and it was looking at the eyes, like looking at each person. The other joy, in a sense, was the fact that we had to shut down the closet at one point. And so nobody was getting clothes. Do you know how hard that was? Because they had to go to showers and they didn't have clothes. So I started to go up to the warehouse and bring down like a few shoes, and I would look for little barefoot children and try to match up the size. And of course, the grapevine, I don't know how they found out we had ropa or we had zapatas, but they would, and you'd start to get mobbed and then you couldn't do anything. But we try to do it, I was struck by our hiddenness, because that's really what I was doing. I was trying to remain hidden so that I could get stuff to a few people before a mob scene would happen. And so again, it's these small little joys, and that whatever I was asked to do was that one face that day. We could never meet that need. Okay, we would never fill all the needs that they had, and yet I was struck by the love that was in that room. A self-emptying love, in a way, for me, of service, self-emptying love of these parents who, went on this journey and knew that it was going to have tremendous pain for them. And we heard 1 or 2 of those painful stories, but they wanted more for their child. I thought of my own parents making that same choice. At the same time, I was struck by the randomness of who came into the clothes closet when we had just filled it and we could fill their need for shoes, for example. The randomness of who got picked, who got through, the randomness of who is going to get asylum in the end, and what that, how that would impact those beautiful people, because that's really what I was struck by, that the beautiful love, the beauty of each one of them. And I just kept praying that every single person in that room would find some peace, some help. I was also struck by the generosity and the goodness of people, not only in the donations we received, but people kept sending us stuff through the mail, which was great. It was like Christmas when we opened the packages and found especially stuff that we needed for people. But it was the goodness of people in the airports, when we saw the manila envelope, when we saw other people going up to help. So it was great goodness being poured out all over the place. And that's what I tended to focus on, because the other was just so painful, so overwhelming, and so frustrating. Where to go from here, I don't know. I will continue to pray, to reach out, to try to do some other small thing, because it is just a small thing, but it's all that God is asking of me at the moment, and of asking of us. So that's kind of where I am at this time. Thank you.
Celeste, thank you. We do have a few minutes. If anyone has a question or a comment, if you could flag us or wave or do something, or just start talking, I guess. If you unmute yourself and start talking, we'll find you. But we're so grateful. We're so grateful for the sisters that we heard from tonight. And we have another gathering tomorrow. And then the last one will be August 31st. And just to give a plug, if any of our sisters are feeling called to volunteer, please reach out to me, and we could set that in motion. Janice McQuaid, I see your hand up.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I was down there with a small group from our church the same time that Seal and Clarissa and Mary and Celeste were there. And when I walked in, I had a handful of money that one of our associates group took up a collection before we left. And when I walked up to the counter, Seal Kavanaugh turned around, and the look on her face was like, it was communion. It was so precious to make that connection with, because all we could see was each other's eyes. And I was able to reach across the counter and give her the money that the associates had collected. And, as they said, they made these shopping trips that were like, pouring water on the beach. But it was so gratifying to come home and tell the associates what I saw and how I felt. I'm still processing it like Celeste. It's going to take a long time. I guess just one I had many experiences, but one that really struck me is every single person or family that came up, I made the sign of the cross on their foreheads and made the little heart sign, and touched my heart, and they all got the signs. And one family wouldn't move after a while. And I kept thinking, why aren't they going? Because there was another little boy that was below the counter that I couldn't see. And they didn't want to leave until he got his blessing. So the dad picked him up, and I made the sign of the cross on his forehead. And then he just had this grin on his face like he had won the lottery. And I thought, the most positive, there was a lot of really painful experiences there, but the most painful or positive was what we talk about all the time, the ministry of presence. The inadequacy I felt because I'm not bilingual. The inadequacy I felt because there were thousands of people coming during the days I was there, and it was, there was no way you could help, and the chaos and the noise and the endlessness of the pain that I saw in their faces. But I thought, this is the ministry of presence at its best. This is a way we can be, when we can't do, we can just be with. And I felt being with was all I could really do. I mean, I kept turning to the folks that came from our church are both Hispanic, so they were helping me, and Clarissa was helping with Spanish. But working behind that counter, I can still hear it and feel it and see it in my mind and in my heart. But I would go again. I would go again, but I would not, like everyone said, I won't go alone, because I think you have to have someone to process that with you. You just can't, you can't talk about it in a void. It has to be a shared experience. So I really appreciate that. And we're looking to sponsor a family who doesn't have a sponsor. We're talking about that here in both of the parishes to see what we can do to sponsor families.
Thanks, Janice. Maybe one more comment or question.
Eileen,
Yes.
Network has a petition on their website. It's, President Biden has not rescinded the Title 42, and that means people coming over can be deported. And so Network's collecting names. So I'll put it in the chat, the link, but you could also go right to Network to find it.
Thanks, Jean.
I just had one more thing, Eileen.
Yes.
Part of the time I was there, I was visiting with a friend of mine. He and his wife, I've been friends with them for 45, 46 years. I met them a long time ago, obviously. But he's talking about some of the changes. He just called me today, and he said, I hope you're all aware that Governor Abbott is aiming to close all the centers at the end of August. And when he was asked about that, he just said, it's no longer my problem. It's going to be Biden's problem. And they're using their PPE money in Texas to complete the wall. They're going to take that money that is supposed to be allocated to help people get back up on their feet economically and emotionally, and they're going to use it to complete the wall. And I guess that these are just facts I just want to put out because they're in my mind. And the last thing that Gus said was, think about this. He's been there 30 years. He said just this past year, 67,000 children have disappeared in Texas. Now, whether they were human trafficked or whether they died coming or when they died after they got here, he said, but nobody can, there's just no comprehension of that kind of a number. And I don't know if anybody else felt this who was at Mcallen, but I have some wonderment of where was the church? I didn't see the church there. I didn't visibly see priests. I mean, I saw some sisters I knew there, but I met Mormons, I met Methodists, I met the Diocese of Brownsville wasn't there. Mcallen parishioners weren't there when we were there. I just wonder about where they are. And when I asked Gus that, he said, people are just exhausted with this whole process, and they do what they can when people come and they offer them hospitality in their homes, they get them jobs. He said, but that whole area of Mcallen, people are just beyond worn out and they can't do anymore. And I thought, well, then the church has to step up. The bishops haven't said anything about this. There's no commentary on this. We're talking about things that do not change people's lives, like who gets communion. But these men and women and children need communion. They need our communion. So I wonder, in terms of advocacy or some kind of a social justice stance or a statement, I'm still reeling with this, but those of us who were at Mcallen saw the unnecessary chaos of that place. Thank you.
I wanted to say thank you as well.
Janice,
Larissa?
go ahead. Clarissa.
I just wanted to say
Go ahead.
thank you for this opportunity to, it's just, I'm very grateful that I had the opportunity to be there and to witness what I did and to share it. We had a really great team. We got to wear these phenomenal t-shirts that Celeste made. And we had an associate who was really like a sister. Pat Harrington was just a doll to be with. And then someone that I'd gone to Guatemala with from my parish was with us, as well as a friend of Cecilia's who had been there last year. So Lisa, it was just, it really is helpful to be in a team. It gives you the sense of support. It gives you some balance with some levity, you know, and as you try to figure out some things and get angry with your GPS and you're down the wrong street and etc. But I would say if you can go in a group, and Celeste would share that logo with you or the t-shirts, and just thank you again to the congregation for this phenomenal opportunity.
I second that, but also I want to thank Seal for being really the front person in organizing our group. She was wonderful. Thanks, Seal.
Thank you.
Well, the congregation wants to thank you folks who spoke today and all the volunteers, you know, in the past few years, the volunteers who have gone. And I see Charlene Kostick is with us, and she's right now in Tucson. So Charlene, we send you blessings, and we can't wait to hear about your experiences when you get home. Well, it'll be in end of August when we hear them, but so please remember, and we know you're writing your blog. As I listen to everyone, I hear like all the certainly all the graces and all the blessings, but it certainly I'm reminded of all the miseries, you know, of our world. So maybe we could just close lifting up all the miseries and praising God for, you know, all the graces, and certainly at this time in the life of the congregation that we're able to share our abundance, you know, with and grateful that you could carry the Sisters of St. Joseph with you as you traveled to whichever site you found yourself, Laredo or Tucson or Mcallen or El Paso. We're so grateful. And to this we say, amen. Thank you all.
Thank you, Eileen.
Thanks, Rose.
Thanks, Rose.
You're welcome.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rose.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Good job. Thank you.
Bye.